Greetings, global audience. My name is Dr. Alusine Kanu. Once again, I'm happy to be here to share my thoughts, my sentiments, my dispositions for your listening pleasure and entertainment and education. The purpose of my presentation today is to talk about small group communication, which is one of the courses I've taught for decades, a long, long time. I'm happy to talk about small group communication, and my approach is first to define what small group communication is. Second, I'm gonna talk about the importance of small group communication in cultures. And third, to talk about the challenges of small group communication. And fourth, to talk about the theories of small group communication, and end my talk by talking about the characteristics and ways to function much more effectively when we are in small groups. Small groups, according to Adams, are the heart of society. We all belong to groups. We have our family groups, we have our friendship groups, we have our social groups, our activity groups, our committees, our work teams, our athletic teams, our classrooms, our groups, our study groups, our political action groups, and our interest groups, and our religious group. So we all belong to groups. And sometimes in groups we communicate face to face, or via email, or on Facebook, or on Wiki, or Twitter, and so forth. So sometimes we use technology when we communicate in groups. Communication occurs in many ways. The series I've been talking about are ways communication occurs in interpersonal settings. Communication also occurs in small group settings, because for small group communication to work, there should be interaction necessities. And for small group communication to work, there should be adaptation when we move together in concert with others. A way to define small groups is that a small group has a purpose. A small group has mutual influence. And a small group has a shared identity. When we belong to groups, sometimes the relations are positive, sometimes the relations are neutral, and sometimes the relations are negative. So small group communication is purposeful. It's a shared symbolic activity, because in groups we use patterns of talk. In groups we are goal directed, we exchange verbal and non-verbal communication skills. A way to observe and understand a small group is that in small groups there is interdependence. In other words, each member is a part of other members' views, thoughts, feelings, sentiments, and dispositions. So there is the relational, which brings the interdependence. Another way to look at a small group is that groups have norms, the shared values, beliefs, procedures, the symbolic activities brings group norms. Groups have a structured pattern of talk. There is sometimes the problem-solving talk. Sometimes there is the relational talk. Sometimes there is the trust talk, or the team-building talk, or the consciousness-raising talk. So groups have a structural pattern of talk. Groups also have goals. In other words, sometimes in groups the goal is to share ways to be productive. Sometimes in groups the goal is to solve a problem. So sometimes problem solving is a way for the group to discuss the quality of work, the member satisfaction, and the consensus building that takes place. Groups have a shared identity. In other words, groups have a symbolic activity. There are many types of groups. There are work groups, there are project groups, there are virtual groups. So small group communication, from my research and point of view, a group is collective action. People put in their resources to accomplish a goal, a task. A group is collective behavior. Sometimes when you observe a group, you can see the patterns of behaviors that group members exhibit. A way to understand how people relate in groups is in terms of individual motives and desires. No matter what the group is, each member has a reason for being part of that group. So a group is also a system within a system within a system in terms of networking. So those are ways I can define what a small group is. In terms of the challenges of a group, one is time. Sometimes group members don't have all the time to always be in groups. Some decisions are made individually. There is also the challenge of avoidance when we are in groups. Sometimes you might want to say something, but you are scared because if you do, the backlash or the reaction. So the challenge of avoidance affects group communication. Also, conflict and problems, the undesirable circumstances, the effect of, when human nature conflicts. Then sometimes there are strange people in groups. So a way to deal with that is you cultivate the relationships in the group. Sometimes there are unreal expectations. Everybody has what they want to accomplish. And some take the thing for granted that the other person will do it if even I do nothing. Sometimes there are personality clashes, some power issues, dominance, egos. Those affect the group process. Some members do not contribute. They leave it up to the other group members. And sometimes there is ineffective communication. And sometimes some people may have the problem of focusing on the task. So how do we deal with these challenges? It's good to set clear, attainable goals. It's good to develop a group identity. It's good to encourage a supportive climate. It's good to engage in problem solving. It's good in groups to make decisions in concert with others. It's good to resolve conflict and to respect leaders in groups. So small group communication is important because it offers many advantages, because a group is a system within a system. So it offers advantages to an organization. Group communication is important because of the functions. Everybody will know the set of skills they need, how to foster creativity, how to have a knowledge base. With groups, you share ideas. You brainstorm, you discuss directions. A good way to have accountability is to work in groups, because you can check with one another to keep the project going. Groups have many advantages because the last of them is that you develop a strategy. You have a clear path when you communicate. So I've defined small group. I've talked about the challenges and the importance. Now I'm going to discuss some of the theories of small group communication. A theory is a statement that explains something. Theories help us to think, to interpret our experiences. So taking small group communication to a theoretical point of view is a good idea, because it results in features of communication. One theory of small group is the functional theory. Functional theory teaches us that there are outcomes of group behaviors and structures. When a group solves a problem, when a group makes a decision, there are outcomes. And when we work in groups according to functional theory, that's a way to achieve goals, because you have a structure that produces the outcomes. So functional theory teaches us that group members must commit to making the best decision. They should identify resources needed. They should determine procedures. They should review the way decision making is done. So functional theory teaches us about critical thinking in small group communication. It's a way to understand the charge, to view alternative solutions, to evaluate the alternatives. So that's functional theory. Another theory is symbolic convergence theory, that we make sense when we communicate in groups because we exchange verbal and non-verbal messages according to convergence theory. We make sense of community-based common experiences and common understandings based on the verbal and the non-verbal exchanges. Symbolic theory teaches us that we can describe what happens in groups. Sometimes we can predict what happens in groups. And we can understand the group theories and group culture based on symbolic convergence theory. Another theory of groups is structuration theory. That the best way for a group to function is for a group to have a structure, for them to have a practice, for them to have rules, to use resources, to function and to sustain itself. So in other words, group members employ as they work together. So structuration theory teaches us that a group should have a focus and a structuring process. That way it helps with the decisions that are made and the problems that are solved. So structuration theory is descriptive, it describes. Another theory of small groups is naturalistic paradigm. It teaches us about the real life groups. That when we understand group communication, we can measure what takes place, we can have objective reality, and we can be able to construct social reality as we interact with one another. So this theory teaches us about communication practices and the norms of the group members. Some of my research reaches me to other theories. The quasi-mechanical model teaches us that in groups you have the input, you have the throughput, and you have the output. The input are the background factors of the group members, their age, their gender, their religion, their ethnicity, the languages they speak. Sometimes those input variables are ways to determine. Then we have the throughput variables, which describes the communication, the development of the group, how they make decisions, how they solve problems, the conflict variables. Then you have the output variables that are a result of the input and the throughput variables. Those output variables leads us to how the groups solve problems, how they make decisions. Those output variables teaches us many things about group communication based on the relevant background factors and the communication variables. There is also the conflict model that sometimes we can tell a group based on the series of conflicts that take place in the group. Then there is the organismic model, that groups are like biological organisms. In a biological organism, each part assumes some function for the overall functioning. In groups, you have the leader, the note-taker, the questioner, the harmonizer, the encourager, the joker. All of those are variables that determine the interdependence of the group members. The goal of most groups is to achieve equilibrium, which is sometimes difficult. And there is the structural functional model, which is one of my favorite models. That a group is a goal-seeking system, that regardless of the group you are in, you have a reason for being part of that group. So my parting comments after my approaches on defining a group, stating the importance of group communication, the challenges, and the theories of groups. My closing statements are to talk about some things we should consider as being ways to work well when we are in groups, in addition, of course, to the thoughts I've shared with you. One of those is to have trust. When we trust our group members, that's a foundation to be comfortable, and we won't be vulnerable where there is trust. We will be able to grow with others where there is trust. Group members should also have a commitment. If I work for you, my goals are to commit my ideas, my thoughts, because when I'm committed to my group, I state the goals of the group and I relate my individual goals to the goal of the group. That's commitment. Communication is important. No person is an island. When you are in groups with others, share your feelings and respect other people's feelings. Help others together. My personal view is this world is a journey. So if I work with you in a group, I'll help you and you help me. Encouragement is essential. Some compete, some cooperate. In essence, it depends, but it's good to encourage one another, to affirm the uniqueness of one another when we are in groups. It's also good to respect the rules when we are in groups. All groups have rules. When you violate the rule, it's going to affect the functioning of the group. It's good to have motivation. Give others a reason to work with you. Process the skills. Listen. Clarify statements. If something is not clear, rather than, have a preconceived notion or observation and inference confusion, clarify, check with the person. Respond to orders. If someone makes a statement, give them feedback. Sometimes in groups, what works well are two things. To have a task-related behavior, focus on the goal of the group. At the same time, focus on the relationships you have with one another. Yes, conflict would happen. Even twins have conflicts. Conflict happens and some one of these days I'll have a whole session to talk about conflict. So, in essence, small group communication is important. We are born into groups, we play in groups, we learn in groups, we pray in groups, we socialize and work in groups. So from the time we are born until the time we die, we are in groups. So it's good to know the definition of groups. It's good to know that groups are important, they are a system, they are cultural. It's good to know when we are in groups, there are challenges. But having consensus is a good way when we work in groups. It's also good to know the theories, what have been studied, as ways to explain small group communication. And it's good to consider the recommendations I've made. My recommendation is watch my YouTube. It's easy. Just subscribe Dr. Alusine Kanu. Each week or every other day, I'll have a new version for your listening pleasure, for your entertainment. I've gone to many cultures. I was born in a small town. I grew up in a small town. So listen to what I have to say in this global village of ours. Thank you for your time and may God bless you.